This is Taranis AcreForward, the ag industry's most thought-provoking podcast. Listen to interesting people as we go in-depth into the issues affecting crop advisors, growers, and farm communities, uncovering the truth about the ag business and using technology to prepare for the unforeseeable. Ready to explore the future? Let's dig in.
So welcome to, our inaugural AcreForward podcast. If you want to learn more about our podcast, it's hosted by Taranis, and it's at AcreForward.com, AcreForward.com. In this podcast, we're going to talk about who we've got here and the list of topics, but the goal or the mission for this recording or these podcasts are just general conversations, particularly about what does it mean to be a farmer today and to work with advisors. How does that look? What are we doing? What are we worried about? If you're in retail or you're with a cooperative today, what are the things that are top of mind, and how are you using tools or things to improve your day, improve yield, improve return, and how is the industry changing? So it's a pretty broad scope, but we understand that we have an audience that's also broad, and that audience will include not just crop advisors, agronomists, farmers, but even those that participate from a technology standpoint. So very, very broad audience. I'm glad to be kicking off the AcreForward podcast. And to do that, we have with us today Luke Carlson. Now, Luke is with Central Valley Ag. I'm going to let him explain his role and his background, where he's located. But we're very, very happy to have Luke here. He's got a lot of expertise and experience, and he works with a very great cooperative that's providing services across Nebraska and other areas to farmers today. So with that, I just want to welcome you, Luke, and maybe tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me here today. First and foremost, I'm a farmer at farm in East Central Nebraska in the Platte River Valley. Corn and soybeans, mostly irrigated. Just the typical Nebraska row crop farm, no livestock. But I'm also the chairman of Central Valley Ag Co-op based in York, Nebraska, which has given me the opportunity to lead a group of farmers that are all owners in that cooperative and to try to improve the practices that we use and also to supply the inputs we need.
So what does it mean? This is great that you bring it up. So you wear, I'd say, a farmer or grower hat, as well as a chairman hat for a pretty large and influential cooperative. So as you look at those two roles, tell us a little bit more about what it means to be chairman at a cooperative.
Sure. So, we are a farmer-owned organization. So without the farmer directing the cooperative, it doesn't exist in its current form, right? So we're elected by our peers to represent each region that our co-op does business in. And our main purpose is to guide and direct and try to set the strategic direction for the co-op, and in turn, hopefully provide better services and value for the customer owners, the farmer owners.
And what are the services that Central Valley Ag provides farmers and its members?
So the big one is agronomy. We have 4 divisions: agronomy, grain, feed, and energy. Of course, agronomy and grain are 2 of our bigger divisions. Agronomy entails fertilizer, chemical, advisory, input, and scouting, a little bit of scouting, all of the above, full service, one-stop shop for agronomy. Of course, grain, we have several rail loader locations, also truck houses. Energy is just your retail fuel sites, and then on-farm delivery, and then feed is feed to make livestock feed. So
basically the cooperative is sourcing and providing all of the supply chain logistics and advisory services to help farmers and those in rural communities have what they need to produce profitable yield to operate their business.
Yes, and also a big one is providing a market for our products. So getting it on the rail and shipping it to those end users and customers that our markets we might not be able to reach from our farm, but collectively together through the co-op, we have the ability and the wherewithal to find and provide those markets. So
it's always interesting when you're in agriculture, we will say something like grain marketing. But when you talk about marketing, a lot of people in business outside of a farmer have it, they could met something else. So what is grain marketing? We take it to another level here. Yeah.
The whole purpose as a farmer for grain marketing is to sell it for more than what it costs you to produce, right? Now, that's not as simple as it might sound from a 10,000-foot view. So really it comes down to knowing your cost of production.
A lot goes into marketing. So when you say the market, just to define it, you're talking about, bid pricing for commodity crops like grain. So corn, beans, things like that. Why is it so complicated? What's challenging about marketing grain? Selling the out in your field, right?
Right. A lot of people don't realize this, but we play on a global playing field. We've got so many outside influences, China, the Ukraine-Russia situation right now, that all affects the grain market that we get on the farm. So, black swan events, which is of course something that you can't foresee coming, might move the market. It might take it from a good year to a not so good year. So many outside influences dictate what the market does. That's what makes it so difficult. It moves, and for sometimes it's supply and demand related, and other times you don't know why it's moving. It just is, one way or the other. So there are a lot of factors involved in grain marketing that are beyond our control. So it's just knowing as much as you can about it to try to make an informed decision.
So major markets, global things affect decisions that are made on the farm and how you're looking at, we talk a lot about yield, but really what a farmer's looking at is return on investment. So there's a considerable investment that goes into managing a farm. How do you look at these grain events, and how does that affect kind of investment choices you're going to make this year on your farm?
The big one has been fertilizer in the last 12 months. Fertilizer prices are falling right now, but you've got to take a look at, you talked about return on investment. You got to look at, okay, how much fertilizer am I going to apply? And when does that rate of return diminish? When do I get to the point of fertilizer application that is not returning enough to justify the application? So really looking at that hard this year is how much fertilizer we're going to apply and when and what form really. So you just got to take it on a input by input basis, figure out what your return on that investment might be, or what it will cost you if you don't make that investment. If you're talking about a crop protection type thing, fungicide application, for instance, I know what the cost of applying fungicide is. I really don't know what the cost of not applying it is. So weighing those factors to determine, which all comes down to your cost of production, to determine what is the right decision in that particular circumstance.
So when you look at that, how do you, there's a lot of places we can go with that conversation. And so I'm trying to keep it broad enough because there's a lot of pieces that go into.
Sure.
If you're going to plant corn this year, how do you make that decision? How do you make the decision on whether it's corn or soybean or another opportunity or crop or say population? How do you even just start this process as a farmer today?
So for myself, I built an Excel spreadsheet, and I've got field by field level input cells. And so I start at the very beginning. Okay, here's my cost of land, and here is my cost of fertilizer, and here's the cost of seed. And I can play with those. Okay, if I want to plant a certain population, what's the cost of seed going to be? If I apply X amount of fertilizer for my yield goal, what's that cost going to be? And all the way down the line, even to your repair expenses, insurance costs, cost of living, because I don't like working for free. I don't know if anybody else does. So I put some in there for the cost of living. And at the very end of that spreadsheet, it spits out, hey, this is what your net income per acre is going to be. And I can tell you this year, corn looks a lot better than soybeans. But in an overall management practice, I have a rotation. I usually plant 1 year of soybeans followed by 2 years of corn. And I like to stay in that rotation. So even though beans don't look as profitable this year, that's worth something to me to keep that rotation of crops in place. So some of those decisions aren't necessarily all financial. Because if you were going to try to squeeze every last penny out of every acre, you would plant 100% corn this year. So there's some other factors involved other than just the cost of the production.
Why is that on corn? You know, for folks that are listening, is it just the commodity pricing where that sits today, or are there other factors that go into this?
It would mostly play into the price of the commodities as they sit today, because your land costs are the same, right, on corn or beans. Your input costs are going to be more to raise corn. Beans, you don't have to fertilize like you do corn. So it costs less to produce an acre of soybeans, but the net return this year looks better on corn.
So Luke, so you talked about the difference between corn and soybean, and maybe I glossed over it. We're talking about commodity prices, right? And how important grain marketing is. And so folks tuning in, they're probably expecting me to talk about drones and other things. But I think to set a framework, we need to know what are the economic indicators that farmers grapple with. Because farmers do a lot more than putting seeds in the ground. There's a lot of decisions. You mentioned spreadsheets. So let's just talk a little bit about the differences in corn and soybean and what you're looking at. So today, what's the corn price range? Like when we talk about a corn price, are we talking about a cash price today or future? What's the difference and how does that affect what you're looking at?
Okay. So today, the cash price of corn is about $5.20. That's what I'm going to get for it, hauling it off the farm into the elevator or ethanol plant or wherever we might be going for it. Now, there's also the Board of Trade. Chicago Board of Trade has the futures price. So that is, you get your cash price by taking the futures price that's set in Chicago by the traders on the floor, or what used to be the floor. It's a lot of people set at computers now. Yeah. And then to get to your cash price, there's a basis number in there. And essentially basis is the cost of transportation from futures to your local market. So you got to take your futures price minus your basis gets you your cash price. So right now to the local elevator, the corn basis is 40 cents for harvest delivery. So we've got a $5.60 futures price minus your 40 cents of basis gives you a $5.20 cash price to the farmer at the local elevator. Works the same way for beans. Basis is supply demand driven a lot. If they need grain to load a train, the basis might what we call narrow. So it might go from a -20 to a -15. Or the ethanol plant needs corn in your local area, the basis might strengthen or narrow. Same concept. So really that basis number moves just as much as the futures does. So you can have a positive basis. The futures price is $5.40, and you might have a positive 10-cent basis, so you would actually get $5.50.
I was noticing that when I look at the CVA website. I may pop that on the screen. We might use this or not, but sure, you can see here where you've got a positive basis versus a negative, depending on your time frame and your month.
Yep,
it's very interesting.
So here in Nebraska locally, we're in a drought. So we had a pretty short crop. We also had some weather events, hail and wind that took a lot of bushels out of our local market. Yeah. So that's why you're seeing a positive basis today is we've got a short corn crop locally. And so they're really bidding for that corn. See, the local market has to bid against the export market to keep those bushels local. So they've got to bid locally enough to keep that corn or beans or wheat or whatever from hitting the rail car and getting out of the country or out of the state, Right. So we've had historically strong basis levels in our local market since harvest. They're trying to keep that grain here rather than letting it leave the area, the market here. So
it's amazing the amount of decisions that have to be made and go into just producing a crop at a farm, and it goes all the way to this point where we're talking about basis in marketing or hedging our risks and understanding where this output goes. I think if it's okay with you, I might go a little bit more basic.
Okay.
Corn you can store, right?
Yep.
The crops have different levels of storage and what you can do. Can we just explain a little bit about what's the difference between corn and soybean and on-farm storage and the way all of this works for folks?
So corn is easier to store than a soybean. Generally, it's easier to handle. It's not as hard on equipment. Soybeans are very abrasive. They'll wear an auger out 5 times faster than corn will. But just in the general basic sense of storage, in my area, you usually get a little more carry. It'll pay you more to store corn. So if you've got dry corn, it's 15% moisture and you can put it in a grain bin, it keeps a lot better. The conditions, the condition makes a big difference on how easily something will store. If you have a wet harvest and corn just won't dry down in the field, so the moisture content doesn't come down. There's a lot more risk in storing wetter grain. It costs you more in energy to blow air on it to try to take that moisture out. It's more susceptible to souring or starting to go out of condition in the bin. So, and we have a lot of ethanol in this area that tends to pay you to store grain or corn anyway. Now, soybeans, our processor market isn't as close for soybeans. So you have to have a lot bigger carry or storage incentive, let's call it, to store beans because it's going to cost you more to ship them out of your bin to the processor. So a lot of beans in my area just go straight to the local elevator at harvest, and they'll store corn in lieu of soybeans. So.
No, that's really interesting. And I think you think about just the basics of how seed treatment works to protect seed before it goes in. There's a big difference between, commercially you can apply that on corn. It's a drier grain and that can be done. We call it upstream, right? The treatments to protect the seed, whether it's a nematicide or an insecticide or fungicide to keep that seed safe. A lot of that is done commercially or at where the seed producer is making it. Whereas soybeans, even your cooperative, you're going to treat that more locally because of the difference just in the physiology of the grain, right? The corn and soy are very different crops.
Yep.
It's really interesting to think about that. There's so many dynamics, and I think when we talk about why does a farmer need an advisor from CVA? I think that's what I'm building up to is you just went through a bunch of economics and we barely scratched surface on grain marketing. And then we got into the physiology or biology of the actual grain. And there's differences in the plants too that we've not discussed and that we will discuss. So I'm trying to paint a picture for people who don't know, like what does a day in the life of a farmer look like? Like what is the job of a farmer? How many different jobs do you do?
A lot of them. You're an agronomist. You're a frontline worker. First of all, your boots on the ground. You're the one out in the field doing the work most generally. So you're the manual labor. You're the manager. You're the accountant. You're the HR person if you happen to have employees. I mean, it's day to day, and it could be all of those things in one day. In my case, I'm involved with the board of directors for a local co-op. So I might put on a different hat and do co-op business for a day. It keeps it interesting. It keeps you on your toes. But a lot of times when you want to talk about having advisors, it's just taking some of that responsibility off of your plate and letting them make some of the decisions for you. I used to try to do all my prescription writing and soil sampling and all that myself. And I realized, hey, this is not my forte. They're going to do a better job than I will. I don't have to worry about it anymore. Probably going to see a better result because of that. Same way with grain marketing. I used to do all that by myself, and it relieves some stress when you have somebody else watching that grain market every day, because of anything's emotional in farming. It's the grain marketing portion of it. You sell grain today and tomorrow it goes up 10 cents and you go, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have sold yesterday. You got to take the emotion. A lot of what farming is taking the emotion out of decision making making a decision and living with it, just moving on to the next day. And because, man, you'll tear yourself up if you dwell on the decisions you made that weren't the right decision. Because for every right decision I make, I probably make 3 wrong ones. But you have to adapt. That's a lot of farming too, is being able to adapt. We're at the mercy of the weather. And so I was married for 10 years before I think my wife finally realized that I really can't make a plan. If the best laid plans, the weather will screw it up. So you're a weatherman as a farmer too. You got to decide, hey, they're calling for rain, but I need to get this herbicide applied. If I apply it, is it going to rain before the rain fast windows close? When I say rain fast, when you apply chemical, it might be a 4-hour window from the time you apply it until the time it can have rain on it, or you've just lost your entire application because it washes it away. So, man, everything that you can think of is a position a farmer holds at one time or another throughout the year.
It's funny that for those people tuning in, as we look at this podcast, I'm with Luke Carlson. He's a farmer in Nebraska and chairman for Central Valley Ag. And you heard us talking about our emotions. When I heard Luke, is there's so many hats we wear in this business. Often mechanic, there's lots of equipment and sophistication. You probably have to be an IT tech person to deal with all the information tech that goes with this as well. But the emotion that's in this, I get the emotion around the hedging and the grain marketing. And you just told me you've got technology that helps you with that. What are the other emotional areas that's okay? It's not like we're laying on a couch talking about our feelings, but talking about farming. What are the things that you're worried about? What are the other emotional decisions you make?
Work-life balance is a big one. I've got 3 younger kids, and farming is not an 8 to 5 job. I miss a lot of their activities in the summertime. And so that work-life balance is really emotional. It can tear on your emotions because you should be somewhere, but you're working instead. Things are changing. You see people my age, they're becoming managers and CEOs of companies, and their career is really developed, and they're in a spot now where they're very comfortable and they have the time to spend with their families. And farming is there's not a lot of accolades for being a farmer. You don't get awards, you don't get promotions, right? It's self-fulfilling. It's a self-fulfilling occupation. So a lot of it's all emotional. But like I said, you got to try to take emotion out of it. Because at the end of the day, it is a business, and you've got to make financial and management decisions that are above and beyond what your emotions are telling you.
Well, that's what I was curious about, is how do you get more of that time back? And then so CVA, Central Valley, has advisors. What are the things that a crop advisor does for you as a farmer?
They sit in meetings, they live and breathe this stuff day in and day out. They know what's coming down the pipeline. They know what technologies might be there. I don't have to vet technology. They've already done that for me, right? They know what works. They know what doesn't. I don't have to vet new products and do a bunch of trials. They're already doing that for me. So really, they do all the legwork and figuring out what's worth looking at, what's not worth looking at. And then also real time in the field in crop information. Hey, I've got a problem with the field. It doesn't look right. Can you come check it out for me? Tell me what's going on. What do I need to do? So not only are they saving you the time of actually going out and walking that field, but they're also helping you make the decision of what's wrong and what needs to be done to correct it. So just a lot of time. They're time saver. And they take some load off in the decision-making process too.
So when you say they evaluate things, we talk about technology. I think some people are going to hear that as computer tech, and we can get into that. That's really not what you're saying. I think for the broader audience, when we say technologies in agriculture, I hear things that are chemistry related, crop protection. I hear things that are nutrition related and the things that go into that. But I also hear things that are biological. So maybe if it's okay with you, let's just start with the season. What's the first thing you got to get right if you want to start a healthy corn crop, Luke?
Man, your seed selection is the biggest thing. Putting the right seed on the right acre, the right, since you brought it up, the right technology. Do I need above ground protection? Do I need below ground protection? Do I need whole plant protection? How am I going to manage those things? If we don't get the seed selection right, maybe we've got a certain soil type that we put a hybrid on, and that hybrid doesn't like wet feet, but you've got low ground and you made that mistake of planting the wrong hybrid, and you get a big rain, and that hybrid's set back from day one. So it starts with your seed selection, and everything hinges off that. You only get one opportunity to get that right in a growing season. So
I think that's pretty important. Talk about when you sell seed or buy seed, you're not buying seed, you're buying your season, right? Your opportunity.
Yeah.
So how do you personally make that decision today? How do you evaluate a hybrid?
So what I have done the past several years is I'll put in a big test plot. I'll have, I think one of the bigger ones has been 35 or 6 hybrids, and I will evaluate multiple hybrids from multiple different companies on my farm. I get to look at it all year long. Say we have a wind event, I know what broke off in the wind and what didn't, what was able to withstand the wind. Everything that I do in that plot helps me make the decision of what I'm going to plant.
And you start seeing all these factors, and I think that's kind of why we do what we do, Luke, is I think what a lot of people miss is you'd say as a farmer, you're independent and you're proud of what you do, but farming is really a community effort. It takes a lot of people, a cooperative attitude and alliances to really understand what's happening, because it's really complicated. So selecting seed, we didn't even get into pricing, what that looks like, when you make the decision. I will ask that though, is when do you decide on the hybrids? Like what time of year you say, I know what I know now, and I've decided that this is what I'm planting and this is where it's going.
Yeah. So they come out with all their early order discounts in it seems like about September now. And a lot of times these companies are wanting you to make hybrid decisions before you've even started harvest. I resist that. I don't want to make a seed decision until I've already completed my harvest and I know what my last year's seed decision turned out to be like. Because there's a lot of hybrids I'm going to want to plant again if they do well. So my seed decision for the following crop year, it's probably done in end of November, early December. And so, yeah, you're making that decision 6 months in advance, probably. And that gives you the advantage of the discounts, the early pay, early order discounts. So it's really the best time to do it.
And when it's seed, you have to understand that you have to have backup plans because it's a biological product. So if they don't have enough of a variety or hybrid that you like, you have to have plan B and plan C.
Yeah.
Unless you're really connected, you have to have a lot of plans to be able to adjust, right?
They usually do a pretty good job, and that's an advantage of ordering early too. You usually lock up the supply you want if you get it ordered early. If you wait till March, this time of year to order your seed, you're probably going to have to take what's left. So
you don't have to answer this, but I do want to ask, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how you look at a crop when it comes out, how you evaluate seed treatments. But, is there a hybrid out there right now that you just think you can't wait to see it? You really think it's going to be a winner? Do you have a favorite that's just in the back of your mind right now that you think is just going to be great this year?
I don't have a favorite. I really think that every hybrid I've selected has an equal opportunity of being that home run hybrid, because it really comes down to the weather, the environmental conditions. I could have a hybrid last year that did phenomenal, and this upcoming year it'll be one of the lower yielding hybrids just because of the environmental conditions.
So if you select a corn hybrid today, what decisions does that lock you into, or at least put you into for the rest of the season? What does it mean to select a hybrid and plant the hybrid in terms of your decisions on the acre for the rest of the year?
There's a lot of different ways you can go. Say you were planting non-GMO seed. Okay, now that changes my chemical program. That changes my management practice because maybe I'm going to have to run a cultivator through it to keep the weeds out of it. Maybe I selected a below ground protection for plants, for the plant, and now I've got corn borer, so I've got to treat for corn borer. It really does set up the rest of your year for your management practices, and it can be 5 different management practices because you made 5 different seed decisions, or it could be you just make the decision. Soybeans is a big one. You've got Extendamax soybeans versus Enlist, or that decision. So what am I going to plant? What chemical am I going to use? And with the Enlist, or not with the Enlist, the Extend, what are my neighbors planting? Because if I decide I'm going to plant just a straight ready, right? But if I'm going to plant a strictly Roundup Ready hybrid, and my neighbors all plant Extend, I got a chance of getting some damage from their spray drift. So it's not even what your seed selection is; it's also what your neighbor's seed selection is as well. So,
and that makes a lot of good sense. And I think, and then how do you evaluate it in the year? So traditionally, what we do, what we offer.
Yes,
this is, so I want to talk a little bit about that just to get a frame of reference of how do you even understand a drop is off to a good start. So I'm just asking you don't have to say any, you don't want to say, but how many fields, just different fields, are you farming? Or just an average farmer? But let's just share, how many fields do you have today?
I don't know the exact number. It's probably 20-ish, and they vary in sizes. So yeah, you really look at each one of those individually as its own little unit, because soil type varies and everything else. But to know that it's off to a good start, emergence is the biggest thing. Emergence tells you a lot of things. Hey, how good of a job did I do with the planter? Was I driving too fast? Was I driving too slow? Was it too cold? Was it too wet when I planted? What's the hybrid? Now just get down to the hybrid. How's that emergence on the hybrid? They score that. So if you go out and I've got this hybrid that's supposed to be phenomenal, but the emergence score isn't very good, and the soil is 45 degrees, you probably shouldn't plant that hybrid first, So you can pick the right hybrid and put it in the wrong conditions and just set yourself back from day one.
And how do you track all of that, right? So once you figured out for sure that that's the hybrid that goes in, how are you getting a view of the stand count across 20 fields?
Right now, it's driving to each one of them individually and looking. Now, the Taranis is very intriguing because the way I understand it, you're able to do stand counts from the air, which would be a huge time saver, instead of going to 20 different fields and walking. I'm only getting a small picture of that field too. I'm not going to walk every square foot of that field and evaluate it. But if I was able to get a whole picture of that field in the emergence, emergence, then you've got to determine why was the emergence not good if you don't have good emergence, so you're still maybe going to have to go ground truth stuff a little bit and say, okay, now I don't have the best emergence or the best stand, so why was that, so we don't repeat that mistake again. So
no, you're right. And I think, that's part of the reason we do what we do. I think there's a lot of ways farmers want to take a look at it. There are different ways to get stand counts. So the way we do it is it's full service. All we do is get field boundaries and planting date through CVA, and CVA offers that opportunity to its members, just like most cooperative and retailers do. So you'll see it on your phone or on your computer, but your advisor will have that. I think that's what I want to talk about. How important is it to get a good stand count? So if you knew pretty close to after emergence, so at emergence, few days after, if you took all 20 of your fields and you knew which ones got a really good start and which ones are kind of struggling, what does that mean for you as a farmer? How should that help you and your advisor make some different decisions?
So I don't put all my nitrogen on up front. So I will side dress nitrogen, top dress some urea when the plant's about 6 inches tall. Then I also put on fertilizer through my pivot. If I know I've got a phenomenal stand count and the yield potential is there, we know we can push that field, maybe spend an extra few bucks on nitrogen because we think we're going to get the return on it because we've got the good stand out there and the even stand that's going to utilize the nitrogen. If I've got a poor stand, I know that, okay, some of my yield potential is gone. Probably don't need to put that much nitrogen out there. I can save some money up front by not applying. And a lot of it's about environmental issues right now, right? Water is a big one. So not over applying nitrogen, making sure you are utilizing the nitrogen you put out there. And a stand count is a good indicator of yield potential, really, and how much nitrogen to apply.
I really like that, because when we started doing this, and the technology is pretty recent, for the last 3 years, we've scaled it, but to be able to do this, a lot of things had to be right. The optics, the battery life, drones, people to do this. They're not the same people that are providing advice that can operate. I can't go to a wedding or sell a house without a drone photographer being part of that story.
Right.
And now we have a story where we're training people in your local community and around the country to provide this as a service. So, but what really starts to happen, it used to be, I have a stand count, is it a replant decision? And what we're talking about is something very different. It's, I have a stand count that's thoroughly documented, that's easily available. It's going to change how I just approach that field and my farm and use resources differently. There's probably a ton of benefits with that, environmental, economic, but that's not a way we farmed in the past now, is it?
Right. No, it's all evolving and changing. And you brought up something that I think I even asked you at the Young Farmers Conference when you were speaking, is people and the skill set moving forward in agriculture with all this technology and who you put in place. So say you've got somebody out there that has the technology piece of it. They know how to operate the drone. They know how to get all this information out of it. Do you take an agronomist and teach them how to be a technology person? Or do you take a technology person and teach them how to be an agronomist? Or is that even possible? So the skill set of the people out here doing this is going to have to be more broad. Their knowledge base is going to have to be, I think, a much wider area in order to accomplish all that. Or you're going to need more people. You're going to need an agronomist, and you're going to need a technology guy, and you're going to have to make them have, they're going to have good communication to get the end result to my level, to the farmer level.
So I think you're seeing it across the board already. I think it's both. You look at equipment, you look at the other things you talked about, you already have it. What we haven't had until recently is the ability to actually have game tape on your acre. Because we talk about the planter, what the planter tells you it did. What the combine tells you what it thinks it got, right? But in between, that's really difficult. I mean, I'm not farm management systems, it's what you put in it. But to get a real systematic view of how that crop has started and progressed, the weed severity, the disease, the insect, these data sets, these capabilities are going to change how an advisor needs to work with a farmer, right?
Yeah, it will.
Because there's a lot more data coming in that should make us better. So we started off talking about emotions. And I think what we start to find is that's usually when things are uncertain. And now we're moving to a data-driven environment, which sometimes there's some resistance for that because we have the ways, change is difficult. But if you know the start your crop got and you start seeing weeds you don't expect, if it's the 10 or 12 fields that you already put your nitrogen in on and you understood, you're probably going to have a lower tolerance for certain kinds or levels of weeds in a crop that's off to a healthy start, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And that's got to be hard to do today unless you get a bird's eye view, I would think.
Yeah. And I've seen this. I'm almost going to call it resistance to change. We're very heavily irrigated, in my area, of course, Eastern Nebraska in general.
Yep.
And in the last 10 years, I would say the early guys started it 10 years ago or better with soil moisture probes and scheduling irrigation based off the information those probes are feeding back to you. Now, you might have the information, but you got to trust it. I know a lot of guys, and I was one of them. You were taught growing up, well, top of the ground's dry, we got to water, and once you start trusting and having faith in the information you're getting out of those soil moisture probes, you do a better job of irrigation efficiency, right? But it's a resistance to change because we've always made a decision a certain way. And I see the same thing coming at us with all these other technologies too, whether it be the drone scouting or nitrogen, they're trying to take pictures of the leaves in real time, and nitrogen, the nutrient deficiencies, there's going to be some learning. There's going to be a learning curve there for farmers to say, okay, I can trust this. It is giving me the right information. And now, without even putting emotion to it, I know I've got to make that decision because that's what the data is telling me. Once again, removing emotion from the decision-making process.
Well, I think that's important. So you got to trust the information. I think when you talk about aerial imagery, which is a subset of what we offer, right? But we're actually offering scale, service, personnel. Just I want you to FaceTime your field, have Ring doorbells for your farm. And when you look at that, you say, how do you trust it? So we have nutrient deficiency detection. But the difference is when you can say sub-millimeter level, I mean, Luke, you saw it. It's like you're standing over the crop, that changes it. Some of these other technologies, here's the output. You need to trust it as ground truth, and this is what it means. Whereas we have a different challenge it's visually so clear that this is what it is. Sometimes we need a judgment call, right? Two people could look at something and say, I think it's this versus that. So we have to get that right or give you the opportunity to see the difference. But what it really starts to do is challenge how you manage, because it means you have to change something that's going on. Like when you see corn chewed up with insect damage, you really can't look away from that when that advisor has visual evidence. And you would think that's always a good thing, but sometimes that reaction, it changes how you're going to manage that farm for the rest of the season and your decision for next year. Do you think everybody's ready for that kind of information to come in to actually understand disease, insect, nutrient deficiency levels? Or what if it shows a mistake that, say, CVA made for that farmer? Where do you see that resistance? Do you think everybody's ready for this technology on their acre?
I think you're going to have to own it. You're going to have to own your decisions and the mistakes you make. But I think in order to remain relevant, I mean, this is the way of the future. This technology, it's going to drive efficiency. It's going to hopefully drive down cost of production. The older I get, the more I realize that time is really my most valuable asset. Anything I can do to save time is a decision and a change I'm probably going to look really hard at making. So I know there's going to be resistance, and I think the people who resist the hardest are probably going to be the ones that exit.
I think about things like the fungicide decision is, do I need one? Well, if you have 20 fields and 15 of them are great and 5 aren't, you can decide that fungicide budget looks a little bit different if it's not on all 20. If you can afford to put it on 10 or 15. Today, that's hard to do without technology showing you where you're starting to have problems or the start that you got. But think about for next year, if you saw and you had the fungicide or you didn't, and you saw the disease pressure, would you be more or less likely to commit to a different program based on visual results and based on understanding crop got? Would you make a decision differently if you saw those metrics and you saw the visual indications of disease field by field?
Yeah, I believe I would. This goes back to your seed selection. They rate, trying to think of the term, but basically, is it economical to spray fungicide on a crop? The crop response to fungicide application. That's where you can see that. You can see that before you even plant the hybrid. The hardest part about fungicide is when, by the time you see it visually with your eyes, you've lost the benefit to the fungicide. It's going to stop the disease from progressing, but your best bang for your buck is that application that keeps the disease from even coming there to begin with. Now, I'm going to guess that a high resolution camera or whatever it is that you use is going to show that stress or that disease before my 2 eyes can see it's there.
Well, I think, what we do is highly visual. So some things, I think in general, there's very few products that have any kind of curative or reach back that's substantial.
Right.
Prevention's always better, right? So when you sell chem, what are you saying? Just use it.
Yeah.
Like year after year, just use it. And then if you're the seed company, here's a benefit of not having to have it here. And that's going to change farm by farm too. It's not always what the seed guide's going to say, is what I understand. But to your point, the way we look at it is, say soybeans or corn, if we start to see a problem in your 20 fields, we're going to see it in the corner before you do because we're looking across these. And if you start to see it, do all fields progress the same way? Do all fields show the same stresses? Would you get after something if you started to see a problem early? Could you stop it elsewhere? So I think that's part of it. The second question, I guess, or when you bring this up, when you make your seed decision, you already told me it was in December. When do you make your fungicide decision?
I always budget for it. That is in my cash flow. On every acre, I've got fungicide budgeted in because it's always better to, hey, there's money I didn't have to spend versus, oh no, I didn't budget for this and now I've got to do it, right? So a fungicide decision is made at the latest for me at brown silk. Okay. So, when pollination is complete. Usually though, if I am going to apply fungicide, it happens at the last branch of the tassel. When that drops, full tassel, for me, that's the optimal time to get that's the most economical or your best chance at getting a return on that application is right at pollination. I'm sure there's some different viewpoints on that. But once brown silk hits, it's, to me, your chances of getting that fungicide to pay for itself are pretty much gone. You might save yourself some harvest. You might save yourself some harvest efficiency because your stuff won't be laying flat, but you're probably not going to add any bushels that way.
And I think that's where the technology is changing this. I think we're getting to a point where now farm by farm, situation by situation, you can start to see the hybrid responses to fungicides and what's really happening for you and your management practice, and your advisor can tailor that. So as you go through this season and you see the right call, I think some of those decisions can be made when you're making your seed selection to say, I know now with confidence that this hybrid needs that support and it will pay off. So for these 10, here's what I'm looking for, and I'm going to keep it clean and I'm going to make sure that I'm monitoring it. So I think, look, that's where the technology for me starts to change. This is the way we used to look at this data or manage. Now we have new data sets in different ways that change things in the season and after the season. I don't know many places where we talked about how you look at all your different fields and start changing where in the field or from field to field, you're going to use these technologies. Because usually it's hard to get a view of that. How far apart are all your fields? I'm assuming you don't just get up on a tower and you can see them all yourself.
No, it used to be the case, but not anymore. From one side of it to the other is about 20 miles. So about a 10-mile circle around from my farmstead, my shop, 10 each direction. So it takes time.
Here. So when a crop advisor is coming from, CVA or any retailer, any cooperative, they've got to know what's going on to earn the right to have a conversation at your farm, right? Your business.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that technology is changing too. So I think that's how we look at it is if we can get an aerial view, if we can document what's there, imagery so good that it can count the holes in a bean leaf, that should give your advisor an advantage in how to work with you. It doesn't replace that person. But all the things we just talked about, we barely scratched the surface, and the decisions you make really results in changing how people should be working with you as a farmer, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, we're going to have just different conversations, that's for sure, or conversations in a different way. And that's all going to just progress naturally, I think. Once you adapt it, it should be easier, or once you get more comfortable with it. But it's going to take some conversations, like I said, building that trust in the information or the data. We'll just have to navigate those conversations as they come.
No, I think you're right. And I think visual evidence backed with good analytics and good conversation, it doesn't replace the people, but it just makes them better. And that's what I really appreciate about this conversation is you get a view of this both representing a very large, respectable cooperative, but also as a farmer, as a member, as an owner. And from both sides of it, you see it moving forward, just technology in general to make the job better, but it's going to have some pain to change how you work together as people, right? Because sometimes you're going to have that conflict much earlier when you see weeds you don't expect, or you see a problem with a hybrid, but you're going to notice that at some point in the season, or if it goes unnoticed, maybe that's worse, right?
Right.
I think the human relationship starting to change on the farm. Now, quickly, just from your point of view, what does it mean to be a good crop advisor as a farmer? Like, what do you expect to see showing up at your farm? What are the services? What's the skill set? How do they help you? What does good look like for a good crop advisor?
Somebody with some experience is also always nice. Somebody who's been around for a while and has seen a few things. As a farmer, it's always nice to feel like whoever your advisor is more knowledgeable than you are on the subject. And we're in the field, whereas I irrigate. I'm in the field a lot more than a lot of farmers in a lot of areas. Dryland farmers might not go to the field quite as often as I do. So I'm expecting an advisor to catch a problem before I do and make me aware of that there is a problem and have solution A, B, and C, or approach A, B, and C already in mind. So when he brings it to me, we can go, okay, that's the right decision and let's do it. Knowing my operation, and I'm very, very fortunate. My agronomist that I've been working with through CBA for several years, unfortunately, is getting ready to retire, but he's good. He can look at my crop, and he was in the combine with me one year, and he goes, this field needs lime. And so, how do you know that? He says, well, I can tell. He goes, I can tell by the weeds you have, the grass you have out here, and for reasons A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, I can tell this farm needs lime. And that just blew me away. And sure enough, we did a grid sample on that farm, and my pH was all out of whack. So that is very valuable to me. Somebody who knows my farms and my soil types is huge.
Takes a long time to get that experience. And I think that's where the technology, they want to move these acres forward. You could take that individual with his expertise. Now that we're digitizing these acres and it's visual, and he can train 10 more like him, right?
Right.
Shorten that curve. And that's what's crazy. Is even I'm old enough to know that all this tech is now different. Now we're sitting in a place where that individual can apply his knowledge across many more acres much quicker and
right.
things and teach those things and work with you. How long ago was it where they leave door hangers saying they scouted your field or they showed up? Because you're not there. You're not on every
right.
field. Whereas now, working with us, you can open your phone and see that farm and see his advice and know what to do. That's just a crazy change that we've had. And I think that's what I'm trying to stress, is it changes how people work. It doesn't just make it easier for him. It makes it easy for CVA to now scale that experience and have advisors that they're hiring now. Because can you imagine how nervous would you be replacing that advisor as a new Iowa State, K-State, Nebraska grad showing up, trying to work with you and learn your farm? That's got to be an uncomfortable challenge for somebody new in the area, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, because if they get it wrong, it's on them. In a sense, though, it's easier than being a farmer making those decisions. Because if I get that decision wrong, it hits me right in the pocket. Right? If an advisor gets it wrong, they made a wrong decision, and this kind of sounds bad to say, but it really doesn't affect them. It does probably emotionally, but financially it does. I live with the decisions I make, and the right ones and the wrong ones. The same way with going back to grain marketing. I have grain marketing advisors, and I often think, well, how do they sleep at night? They got to deal with this market every day, and it's up and it's down. And at the end of the day, I'm going, well, if they tell me to sell grain and it's the wrong time, they made a mistake, but they don't have to live with it. They might not get hired. They might not be working for me anymore. Right. They do it too many times, so yeah, it's. I would say the biggest thing for a young agronomist who doesn't have the experience has got to be the emotion of worrying that they're making the wrong decision or the wrong recommendation. So any information or technology they have to help them make a better recommendation is going to be helpful to them.
Well, I think that's why being local is so important. That's why we are based in the U.S. That's why we have so many people locally. It's why CBA does what it does. Is you have responsibility when you're in front of somebody, and the decisions you make, you have to be right year on year. You have not just an obligation, but a drive to succeed. I think probably that's the underwritten story about what Taranis and the AcreForward solutions provide. Luke, this is a chance to engage on a regular basis and be accountable for what's happening. And organizations like CVA and others that take this on, what they're really saying is, I want to know you better. I want to be accountable. I want to show you what's going on. And let's have some facts here, because farming does take a community of people. I mean, the folks that are serving your farm live in your zip code. And if you live in a zip code with that much corn, how many employment options are there?
Right. How many?
Not many, but there are better ones with companies like CVA that have this kind of tech that allow people to come in and provide that kind of service. So I think it's really interesting. I think there's a lot of things to cover. I didn't get you to give me a hybrid that you're really looking forward to this year, so we'll have to try that in another podcast or session. But I do want Luke Carlson to say to you, first, thank you for joining us for this podcast. We have so much more to talk about. You're an excellent guest because you're able, the amount of stuff that you know and your willingness to share and the role you have, really appreciate you coming on. Also want to say the season's just getting started. And so hopefully as we get through the season, we can check back in with you and say, what are you seeing out there? How's this working? The good, the bad, the ugly, right? Maybe look at your farm directly and see, what does this look like? And maybe we can pick out those hybrids from some leaf level imagery and bring some of your seed friends on and your CVA advisors on and talk about how we use this and what are we doing different. But I really appreciate you taking the time today. And I really just want to say thank you to you and CVA for the partnership. And I'm hoping you're having a great season, but it sounds like you're in good shape and you're ready to go.
Well, ready to
hear about CVA, Luke? And just want to say,
I just appreciate you having me on. And the whole podcast thing is pretty new to me, but it's a lot to be gained from conversations like this. So I appreciate you letting me come on and talk with you and visit about Taranis and CVA, and look forward to talking to you again.